This is a question for people that run their chains with unequal length cutters. Say you've hit something, damaged a cutter, um, you shorten up that particular cutter and leave the rest at their original length. I've done this in the past and had some issues, but there's one question I could never answer, and I'm hoping someone can. Now, I completely understand that we can adjust for the height of the cutter with the depth gauge, because a cutter's top plate tapers down, so we'll have it sloping down from front to back for its required clearance angle. Adjusting the depth gauge will allow you to compensate for the height. What I've never been able to work out how to compensate for is the inward taper of the side plate. If we look at the front corner of the cutter, they slope inwards towards the center of the chain because it requires side clearance angle as well to function. So what happens if you shorten a cutter, say you took half off this one in particular, it moves the corner inwards. It's not a big adjustment, but it does occur. The problem I've had in the past, so say that front one, this front cutter up here gets damaged and we lose half the tooth. My experience with leaving it like this is when you go and start cutting, when you go to sharpen the chain, you notice that this one, the next one in line on its side, has a lot of damage on the corner, a lot more than any other cutter on this side of the chain. It'll generally go back one more as well. So this one will have a bit more damage than the one that's behind it. This is because this front tooth can still take a bite with the top plate and remove a chip. However, it's slightly narrower than the one behind. So when this one comes along, it's trying to dig in as deep as it should, but the side of the kerf hasn't been cleared like it should have been. So it puts a lot of extra load on this one. So it takes some damage. You continue cutting, every other tooth on here is fine, so you're not going to stop cutting. But this one goes dull. It gets a bit of damage to that corner, and it doesn't perform as well as it should. So the damage moves to the one behind it, because now there's two in a line on that same side that can't remove the amount of wood that it should. So the damage moves back and it moves back. So what happens is, you shorten that front one, the next one or two take damage. Next time you sharpen it, you need to remove more off the second one and the third one than the rest. And this carries on until it runs in a loop, essentially back to square one. And once you've got to that point, if you haven't equaled the other side, it really changes the side-to-side pulling force that the chain's under, and it generally cuts pretty bad. The other issue that occurs, and I believe this is why the manufacturers tell you to try and keep them within reason the same length. When this cutter becomes shorter, and thus narrower, and also lower in height, the rivets that hold it now have to do a lot more work every time this cutter takes a bite. It's shorter, so it needs to rise further up than the rest of the chains in this loop, in this sequence. So it now has to rise more, so when it rocks, it'll rock back, and then as it comes to take its bite and it levels out, it has to be pulled up, but it has to be pulled up further than the rest. It also causes this following cutter, as it hits the part of the side of the kerf that the other one didn't clear, to be pulled further to the side. Keep in mind, when they're cutting, they generally come up out of the rail, and the tension from this tooth here being up to take its bite will pull this one up slightly out of the groove. So the chain gets a lot more side to side force on it, as well as the rivet doing extra work. So they're the issues I've had with it in the past. I've found it to be a bit of a false economy, damaging say two and then just sharpening them as they are and leaving the rest as they were. you think you're saving money by not wasting the tooth filing it, but honestly, for me, it's always come back to bite me. Each to their own. I can understand why you're doing it. If you're cutting soft wood, probably makes little to no difference. But yeah, I've never been able to answer that question or have anyone answer that question of how do I compensate for the tooth becoming narrower. Be interested to hear if anyone has a good answer on that one, but I'm not sure how it works.